the Super Smash Bros. Series has been one of the most popular series of all time. It started as a simple reinvention of a fighting game genre, but quickly developed into a massive franchise. In only 4 games, the series has sold a stunning 38 million copies. One of the many reasons the series is so popular is that it knows how to reinvent itself over and over again. If you look at Smash 64 compared to Melee, or Melee compared to Brawl, these games all feel very different. With Super Smash Bros. For the N64, our story begins. Smash 64 was released in 1999, and was a humble start for the gargantuan franchise we know today. The entry to the Smash Bros. Series started as a cross between the ideas of 2 icons of game development. The first of the 2 was Masahiro Sakurai. Sakurai had made a name for himself by creating and leading the Kirby series. Sakurai would be the director of the game. He would come up with the ideas. He needed a programmer, someone who could turn his ideas into a real game. He approached Satoru Iwata, a gifted programmer who had helped Sakurai in many Kirby games. Together, they envisioned a game that could reinvent the fighting game genre, which by this point had grown stale and trite. Fighting games up to this point had been defined by a few characteristics. First, each player was locked on one side of the screen. This made approaches complex for high-level players, but was pretty dull for anyone else who wanted to play. The second defining feature was a huge amount of moves. Each character would do a huge variety of moves, with very different control schemes for each. This also made casual players uninterested. Your goal would be to land as many of these moves individually as possible. Walk up, try to get a few hits in, and back up. Finally, older fighting games would be set in one dimension. In Street Fighter, you could only move left or right, with the occasional jump to throw your opponent off. Tekken played with the formula a bit by adding a Z dimension, but that didn't really change things up either. Super Smash Bros. Made a few key departures from other fighting games, all centering around the idea of giving players a lot more options for more varied gameplay. In Sakurai's interviews about Smash 64, he always talks about the theme of a new experience every time you play. You can still feel this in Smash entries today. First off, Smash gave players the X and Y axis instead of just the X axis. Using the Y axis gave the gameplay a lot more options, and it didn't lock you on one side of the screen either. Instead of very restricted movement, the game felt like a platformer. This worked into the next idea that Smash set itself apart with, a change in scoring. Instead of depleting your opponent's life bar, you try to knock them out of the stage. This gave players many alternatives when trying to deal with their opponents. Thirdly, Smash decided to use a small amount of versatile moves instead of a bunch of specific ones. Most Smash moves are pretty weak individually, but real magic happens when you learn to combine moves together. The amount of combinations you can perform is unlimited. A lot of people call Smash a sandbox fighting game, and this is why. Finally, Smash enabled 4 players to play at the same time. While this added a lot of fun, it also made gameplay that much more unpredictable. A new experience every time you play. To set his game apart from others, Sakurai decided to have all the famous Nintendo characters fight. Knowing that the higher-ups would reject his proposal, he worked on it in secret until he had the game perfectly balanced. The idea was eventually approved. Even though having Nintendo characters fight was a core part of the game, you can kinda feel how the Nintendo theme was added later. All of the characters and stages are from Nintendo, but you don't really see the series put Nintendo at its core until later. Critically, it got great reviews. Sakurai and Iwata's bet on an alternative fighting game had paid off. This is one of Iwata's last roles as a programmer, and moved towards a more corporate focus. Eventually, he would become president of Nintendo. The awesome fighting mechanics were praised, and people wanted more. With such high expectations, it's not impossible to imagine the sequel being disappointing. Fortunately, the sequel didn't just meet everyone's expectations, it exceeded them in every way possible. Super Smash Bros. Melee was a major leap forward for the franchise. Smash 64 was an experiment to see if alternative fighting style could work. Knowing that it could, Sakurai could now go all in on his bet. Melee was released in 2001, a mere 3 years after Smash 64. If you look at the franchise's release cycle, you can see how crazy fast this release actually was. In a column with Famitsu, the famed video game magazine, Sakurai explained, "On a personal level, Melee had an extremely grueling development cycle. Some of my other games did too, but Melee sticks out far ahead of the pack in my mind. I worked on that game for 13 months straight after all, without a single Sunday or holiday off that whole time. During parts of it, I was living a really destructive lifestyle. I'd work for over 40 hours in a row, then go back home to sleep for 4. You can feel Sakurai's dedication when playing Melee. It takes what Smash 64 started, and soars. It's a step up in every direction. New modes, new characters, new stages, full orchestral music, and superior graphics. But the two biggest enhancements are the two things that make the Smash Bros. Series what it is: its Nintendo theme and its gameplay. Smash Melee nails the Nintendo theme. While Smash 64 just kind of happened to have a Nintendo theme layered on top of it, Melee is a complete celebration of Nintendo. Adventure Mode allows players to explore many famous Nintendo worlds. The stages feel alive and are completely designed around their respective franchises. Trophies allow the player to learn a vast amount of information about Nintendo. The gameplay also got a huge boost. Players were given more highly technical options that allowed for complex moves, helping continue the theme of a new experience every time you play. Wave dashing uses air shield dynamics to allow you to position yourself quickly and safely. Power shielding allows any character to reflect projectiles through rapid inputs. Melee is known to be the fastest game of the Smash Bros. Series. This makes it the most popular game of the series from a competitive standpoint, even after 2 sequels. Melee got amazing reviews across the board and is still revered as one of the greatest games of all time. It's also the best-selling GameCube game of all time. After Melee, Sakurai turned to more experimental titles. In 2003, he released Kirby Air Ride, an alternative take on the racing genre. It got mixed reviews, but slowly gained a cult following. In 2005, he helped design Meteos, an odd puzzle game that was received pretty well. However, a new console is on the horizon, the Nintendo Wii. Satoru Iwata, now the president of Nintendo, needed help on the Wii. Most of the Wii's games were aimed at the casual gamer, so Iwata needed a headliner game that would appeal to core gamers and casual gamers alike. Iwata asked Sakurai about creating a new Smash Bros. Game, and Sakurai agreed. The game was announced in spring 2006, just after E3. Super Smash Bros. Brawl was released in 2008, 7 years after Melee. Brawl is noteworthy for two main things. First off, it made the series a lot more accessible to newcomers. Second off, it pushed the Smash Bros. Series in new and innovative directions. While the gameplay of Melee is fast and frantic, Brawl holds its punches. This was a controversial change. Many competitive players were disappointed that mechanics were toned down. Because of this, Brawl's competitive scene isn't remotely as popular as Melee's. It did, however, make the series a lot more approachable to newcomers, and the sales show it. Melee sold about 7 million copies globally, while Brawl sold about 12 million copies globally. Brawl is, however, far more innovative than Melee. I feel that Sakurai took his creative streak from Kirby's Air Ride and Meteos and extended it to Brawl. While Melee made most of its changes off of what Smash 64 started, Brawl makes its own changes. It added the Subspace Emissary, a full-fledged story mode within a Smash Bros. Game. It's also the first Smash game with an internet connection, allowing you to fight it out online. Even it has an entire stage builder, allowing players to make their own arenas. Even Brawl's art style is a far departure from Melee's. Instead of looking cartoony, Brawl's looks fleshed out. It's the only game to use this gritty style, but it still holds up today. Brawl is probably the most experimental entry of the series, but it was still a huge hit. It was the fastest selling Nintendo game of all time, and it had amazing scores across the board. However, people criticized Brawl for being a bit rougher on the edges. Its story mode was generic, and online play was laggy and unstable. In 2011, Satoru Iwata announced that development had begun on the next Super Smash Bros. Game. Sakurai would be directing again. Where could the series move from here? Smash 4 was released for the 3DS and the Wii U in 2014, making it the most recent entry in the series. Smash 4 is all about refining the series. If Brawl is a rough draft, Smash 4 is the final form. While Smash 4 does add new features, this isn't the focus. Smash 4 is all about perfecting the series. The graphics are a great example of this. They are very clean and to the point. They don't embellish the graphics, but at the same time they don't make them too rough. Another example of refinement is the gameplay. Smash 4 is faster than Brawl, but slower than Melee, making it feel just right for both the average player and the competitive player. Smash 4 does innovate in a lot of spots, but these are deliberate innovations. Sakurai doesn't try to do anything too crazy. The Smash Bros. Series has been a popular one. It started with Smash 64, which redefined the fighting game genre. Once the concept was established, Melee stepped it up in every single way, and gave the series a huge competitive flair. Brawl held back, made the series a lot more accessible, and created some lasting innovations to mix things up. Smash 4 took all of this together and created the final form. Together, these 4 games produce one of the greatest franchises ever, Super Smash Bros.